My parents actually smirked when I entered the conference room, their expressions suggesting they believed I had come to beg for scraps. I remained silent, simply placing the thick red folder onto the mahogany table and sliding it toward the lawyer. Mr. Calder's face turned ashen, his complexion draining of color. He abruptly closed the estate file and muttered that he needed to contact the court right away. I am Lydia Russell, and I had always been invisible to those who raised me until the moment I became a threat. The reception area of Calder and Wren was designed to overwhelm. It was filled with polished marble and dark wood, carrying the scent of aged paper and sanitized wealth. The office occupied the 42nd floor of the tallest building in Crestwick, a city where altitude was equated with virtue. The higher you were, the closer you supposedly were to God, or at least, the more you could look down on everyone else. I sat in a leather chair that likely cost more than my first car, my hands resting in my lap. I checked my watch, 8:58 a.m. 2 minutes to go. I wasn't nervous. I had spent 20 years being nervous. I had been nervous when I asked for lunch money. I had been nervous when I requested a signature on a college application. I had been nervous every time the phone rang and I saw their number flash on the screen. But fear is a currency, and I had finally run out of it to spend on them when the heavy oak double door swung open. A paralegal with a tight bun and weary eyes nodded at me. "Miss Russell," she said, "they're ready for you." I stood, smoothing the front of my charcoal gray blazer. I picked up my bag, which contained only one item of importance. Then I walked into the conference room. The space was vast, dominated by a table long enough to land a small plane on. At the far end sat Miles Calder, the senior partner, a man in his 60s who wore three-piece suits and had the kind of silver hair that inspired trust in widows. To his right were my parents, Gordon and Elaine Russell. They looked flawless. My father wore his navy club blazer, the one with brass buttons, while my mother was dressed in a cream silk blouse that made her appear delicate and refined. Their hands were clasped together on the table, presenting a united front, a picture of mournful devotion. When I fully entered the room, their act faltered. For just a second, Gordon looked up. His gaze swept over me, from my practical shoes to my pulled-back hair. Then he glanced at Elaine, and then it happened, the laugh. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was worse. It was a quiet exhalation through the nose, a small, vibrating chuckle that shook his shoulders. It was the sound you'd make if a dog wandered into a formal dinner party. It was the noise of amusement mixed with absolute dismissal. "Lydia," my father said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We didn't think you'd actually show up." My mother covered her mouth with a tissue, but I saw her eyes, they were crinkled at the edges. She was smiling behind that tissue. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with the sugary venom she had perfected over 3 decades. "This is a legal proceeding. It's for family and beneficiaries. You didn't need to take time off work. We could have sent you a memento later, maybe one of Mother's old scarves." They thought I was there to beg. They thought I was the prodigal daughter returning for a scrap of the estate. They were so confident. They had spent the last 10 years charming my grandmother, Estelle, or so they believed. They had spent the last 6 months hovering over her deathbed like vultures, waiting for her pulse to stop. They knew the numbers. They had probably already spent the money in their heads or new boat for Gordon, a sunroom extension for Elaine. I didn't say a word. I pulled out the chair across from them. The distance between us was about 8 feet of polished mahogany, but it felt like a chasm. Miles Calder cleared his throat. He was a man who preferred quick resolutions and billable hours, not family drama. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell, Lydia," he began, "let's get started. As you know, we're here to read the last will and testament of Estelle Marie Russell." He placed a thick document on the table in front of him. It was bound in blue paper, the standard will, the one my parents knew about, the one they had likely helped draft. Hovering over my grandmother's shoulder, guiding her trembling hand, my mother was very clear about her wishes, Gordon said, leaning back, his confidence radiating like heat. She wanted to keep the assets within the primary household to ensure the legacy is managed by those with experience. Experience, I said. It was the first word I had spoken. My voice was steady. It didn't waver. Gordon's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Nothing, I replied. Please, Mr. Calder, proceed. Calder adjusted his glasses. Yes, well, I have the document dated October 14th, 2 years ago. It names Gordon and Elaine Russell as the primary executors and sole beneficiaries of the estate, including the property at 400 Harrow Lane and the entirety of the investment accounts held at. My parents squeezed each other's hands. They were practically vibrating. This was the payday, the validation, the eraser of me. I moved. I reached into my bag. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate precision of someone defusing a bomb. I pulled out the folder. It wasn't a standard manila folder. It was redder deep, dark crimson, and it was thick, about 2 inches. But the color wasn't the most important part. The most significant detail was the seal. Across the opening of the folder was a thick strip of tamper-evident tape stamped with a specific logo, a skill balancing a sword, the old, original seal of Calder and Wren, a seal they only used for internal, high-security, sensitive documents, the kind that never left the vault. And right in the center, in my grandmother's shaky but unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "For Miles Calder's eyes only." I placed the folder on a table. The sound was heavy, echoing in the quiet room. I pressed 2 fingers on top of the red folder and slid it across the mahogany. It made a dry, rasping noise as it traveled over the expensive wood, stopping exactly 6 inches from Miles Calder's hands. Gordon and Elaine were still smiling, but their expressions had frozen. The smiles were stuck on their faces like masks that had suddenly become too tight. They looked at the folder, then at me, then at the lawyer. Miles Calder looked down. He saw the red cardstock. He saw the tape. He saw the logo. The color drained from his face so quickly, it was as if someone had pulled a plug in his heels. He turned gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand, which had been holding a gold fountain pen, went limp. Clack. The pen hit the table and rolled, coming to rest against the edge of the blue document. The silence in the room shifted. A moment ago, it had been the quiet of anticipation. Now it was the silence of a heart attack. Calder stared at the folder as if it were a radioactive isotope. He didn't touch it. He just stared at the seal. I saw a bead of sweat appear on his temple, right at the hairline. "Where did you get this?" Calder whispered. His voice was hoarse. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder. But it cracked. "Miss Russell, who gave you this file?" He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a ghost. He was seeing a catastrophe. He was seeing the end of his career. "My grandmother," I said, my voice calm. I was the only person in the room with a normal heart rate. She gave it to me 3 days before she passed. She gave me very specific instructions. Gordon made a noise. It was a scoff, but it sounded wet and choked. "That's ridiculous. Mother was bedridden. She couldn't lift a spoon, let alone organize a secret file. This is a prop, a fake." I ignored him. I kept my eyes on the lawyer. She said, and I quote, "Do not open it. Do not let anyone else touch it. Just give it straight to Mr. Calder. He will know what the red tape means." Calder swallowed. I saw his Adam's apple bob up and down violently. He knew what the tape meant. I didn't, not entirely, but I knew it terrified him. "This is impossible," Calder muttered. He reached out a trembling hand toward the folder. "This file shouldn't exist. The protocol for a red seal is..." He stopped himself. He looked up at my parents. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, stunning horror. Gordon sensed the shift. He sensed that the boat he had been planning to buy was sailing away. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Let me see that," Gordon barked. He lunged across the table. "It's a forgery. She's lying. She has always been a liar." His hand grabbed the corner of the red folder. "Do not touch it," Calder screamed. It wasn't a professional lawyer's voice. It was a shriek of panic. But Gordon didn't listen. He yanked the folder. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The door behind us burst open. Two uniformed security guards stepped in. They had been waiting. Calder must have hit a silent panic button under the desk the moment he saw the seal. Or perhaps the firm's protocol for that specific file required immediate containment. Double quotes, sir. Step away from the table, the lead guard said. He was a large man who looked like he bent steel bars for fun. Gordon froze. His hand was still on the folder. He looked at the guard, then at me. His face turned a mottled purple. I am Gordon Russell, he declared. I am the executor of this estate. I have a right to see every document on the stable. Not that one, Calder said. His voice was shaking, but it was firm. He stood up, snatching the folder back from Gordon's grip and pulling it close to his chest. He held it like it was a holy relic or a loaded gun. You do not have the clearance to see this, Mr. Russell. Nobody does. Not yet. Gordon slumped back into his chair. He looked defeated, but mostly he looked confused. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the bewildered anger of a man who realizes the rules of the game have changed without his pay. RM is SION. Elaine was trembling. She reached for Gordon's arm, her fingernails digging into his blazer. She looked at the red folder, then at the lawyer's pale face. She was smarter than my father. She realized faster that something terrible was happening. Calder took a deep breath. He picked up the blue will, the one they thought was the only one, and closed it. He stacked it on top of the other papers. I am suspending this reading, Calder announced. You can't do that, Gordon sputtered. We are here. Read the damn will. I cannot proceed, Calder said. He looked sick, given the introduction of this evidence and the specific nature of the seal. I am legally and ethically bound to hold all proceedings regarding the Russell estate immediately. He looked at me. There was no kindness in his eyes, only fear. I need to call the probate court, and I need to call the firm's ethics committee. Ethics? Elaine squeaked. Why would you need an ethics committee? Calder didn't answer her. He walked to the door. He paused, turning to the security guards. Stay in this room. Watch them. Make sure nothing leaves this table. Then he looked at me one last time. You have no idea what you have just done, do you? I did what I was told, I said simply. Calder exited the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. We could hear him in the hallway, barking orders at his assistant to get Judge Holloway on the line. Immediately, the silence returned, but now it was heavy and suffocating. My mother turned to me. The tears started instantly, summoned on command, like rain from a cloud-seeding plane. She reached across the table, her manicured, soft hand, because she had never done a day of manual labor in her life, reaching for mine. I pulled my hand back. Lydia, she sobbed. Lydia, honey, what is this? What is in that folder? Why are you doing this to us? I didn't do anything, I said. Grandma did. We are family, she pleaded. Her voice dropped to a whisper, intended to sound intimate, but it just sounded desperate. Your father and I have bills, Lydia. The house needs repairs. We were counting on this. We have debts. I know, I said. I know about the debts. Her eyes widened. The tears stopped for a microsecond, then resumed. You are trying to hurt us, she said. You have always been so jealous that we stayed with her, that we took care of her while you were off in the city playing with your spreadsheets. Took care of her, I repeated flatly. We were there every day, Gordon shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The security guard stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Gordon flinched and lowered his voice. We were there, you were gone. You have no right to sabotage this family. I am not sabotaging anything, I said. I looked at the spot where the red folder had been. I am just balancing the books. Elaine wiped her face. The mask of sadness was slipping, revealing the venom underneath. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we gave you, a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and a bill for every single item. I still have the receipts, I said. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. We sat there for 10 minutes of Gordon staring at the wall, his jaw clenching and unclenching. 10 minutes of Elaine weeping softly, occasionally shooting daggers at me with her eyes. 10 minutes of the security guards watching us like we were inmates in a high-security holding cell. I just watched the clock. 9:25. Then the door opened. Miles Calder walked back in. He looked different. He looked like he had aged 5 years in 10 minutes. His tie was slightly crooked. He was no longer the master of the universe. He was a man who had just looked into the abyss. He walked to the head of the table. He did not sit down. He placed both hands on the mahogany surface and leaned forward. "I have spoken to Judge Holloway," Calder said. His voice was ice cold, devoid of any client service warmth. "And I have initiated a mandatory freeze on all assets connected to Estelle Russell, Gordon Russell, and Elaine Russell." "What?" Gordon stood up again. "Why my assets? This is about my mother's will." Calder ignored him. He looked straight at my parents, then at me. "The contents of that folder," Calder said, speaking very slowly, "contain allegations and documented proof of actions that go far beyond a civil dispute." He looked at the security guards. "Escort Mr. and Mrs. Russell to their vehicles. They are to leave the premises immediately. This is an outrage." Gordon shouted, "I will sue you. I will sue this entire firm." Calder finally smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a grim, terrifying smile. "Mr. Russell," he said, "based on what I just read, you are going to need the retainer for a criminal defense attorney, not a civil suit." Gordon stopped shouting. His mouth hung open. Elaine grabbed her purse. She looked at me, her eyes wide with true and filter panic. "Lydia, what was in there? Tell me." I said nothing. I just watched them. Calder turned his gaze to the rest of the room. He looked at the papers scattered on the table. "I want to make one thing very clear," the lawyer said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating with a threat that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Nobody leaves this room with so much as a paperclip. The office is now on lockdown." He looked directly at my father, because if anyone, Calder said, attempts to remove, delete, or alter any document from this point forward, it will not just be considered a violation of probate law. It will be considered destruction of evidence in a federal investigation. My parents stopped breathing. The air left the room. I sat back in my expensive leather chair. I looked at my father's pale face. I looked at my mother's trembling hands. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel like the one who owed a debt. I felt like the one who had come to collect.